Bankroll management. What does that even mean? Welcome to Sports Betting Truth, where it is my goal to give you actual sports betting advice without the touting, shilling, hype, or false promises. Now today's going to be all about bankroll management. What does that even mean? Anytime you look at general sports betting advice, you always hear you need to practice good bankroll management. But that's so vague, it's so broad. A lot of people don't do a good job explaining what exactly that means. So today I'm going to try to cover as many bases as I can with that. Now the first thing you need to do is drop the fantasy. And when I say drop the fantasy, I mean drop the fantasy that you're going to become rich betting on sports. It's just not going to happen. The only way you can make decent money betting on sports, and by decent money I mean enough money to replace working full time, you got to have a bankroll of at least 6 figures. And if you have a bankroll of 6 figures, you're probably already well off. So just drop the fantasy that you're going to become rich betting on sports. When you can do that, all these other points are a lot more manageable. So the first thing we're going to talk about is bankroll. So bankroll is the amount of money you're drawing from to bet on sports. Your bankroll will set the tone for everything else. Your bankroll needs to be an amount of money that you're okay with losing. If you're to lose it all, you would still be okay financially. You don't want to bet with money you don't have. That's a part of bankroll management. You bet with money you can afford to lose. Now, I'm not saying you're going to lose all of your bankroll very quickly. That just doesn't happen unless you're extremely unlucky. But it's a starting point, it's a buffer to keep you safe financially. And from there, you can go on to unit size. Now, a good starting point is 1% per game. So if you have a bankroll of $10,000, that's $100. That's usually a pretty good starting point, but you can bet a little bit more or less depending on the circumstances. At the very least, try to keep it no more than 5% per game. That way, if you lose 20 times, you're wiped out. At least you have a 20 loss buffer before you're wiped out. It's all about risk versus reward. If you want to bet more, you run the risk of ruin quicker. If you want to bet less, you can make your money last longer. It's risk versus reward. Which brings me to another risk versus reward point. Do you want to bet to win 1 unit, or do you want to bet 1 unit on a game? For example, a minus 200 moneyline favorite. If you were to bet $100 on them, 1 unit, $100. If you were to bet $100, you would get $50 back if they were to win. Or you could bet enough to win $100 if they're to win. In that case, you'd have to bet $200. Again, it's risk versus reward. Betting 1 unit on that game will minimize your wins, but also minimize your losses. Betting enough to win 1 unit will maximize your wins, but also maximize your losses. Again, it's up to you. Do you want low risk, low reward, or high risk, high reward? Personally, for me, it depends. I do a little bit of both. You don't have to do one or the other. You can mix and match. Which brings me to point number 3, flat unit versus variable unit betting. Do you bet the same amount per game no matter what your edge is, or do you bet a variable amount per game based on what you perceive your edge to be? For example, a flat bettor would just bet $100 across the board no matter if they had a minor edge or a major edge. A variable unit bettor would hypothetically bet more if they feel like they had a larger edge and less when they feel like they had less of an edge. Again, it's another risk-reward thing. Hypothetically, if your edges are correct, you would make more money variable unit betting because you're betting more on games you have more of an advantage. But flat unit betting is a more safe approach. It can also be a more dangerous approach because you're placing the same amount of money on lower edge games as you are higher edge games. So really it's a matter of preference. Neither way is wrong, neither way is right. But if you have a good model that accurately projects edges, you probably want to at the very least find some sort of way to bet more on games you have a higher edge in. What I personally do is a hybrid. I do tiered betting. So I bet based on tiers. It's not a true linear equation where it's a formula based on how much I bet, but it's based on tiers. So I have a low tier, a mid tier, a high tier, which each have their own flat units per tier. That way I'm still betting more on games I have a higher perceived edge in, but at the same time I'm still minimizing my risk with flat units so I don't go too overboard. And then we're going to talk about what I call the sniper approach versus the shotgun approach. Do you bet a low number of games like a sniper and carefully select your games, or do you use a shotgun approach and bet a lot of games? Myself, I consider myself to be a volume bettor. Here's my advice. Bet on games that you have an edge in. Don't limit yourself. If you have an edge, bet on it. Keyword, if you have an edge, not if you think you have an edge. If your model's good enough, you should know when you have an edge and when you don't have an edge. So if you have an edge, bet on it. That's what I do. My models have large enough sample sizes to where I know when I have an edge or not, and I bet on it. Here's a look at my college football results from last year week by week. As you can see, I made 439 total plays on the season. That's a lot. I made 292 side bets against the spread. That's a lot. I averaged about 18 bets per week. That's a lot. Other people say pick carefully, only bet 1 or 2 or 3 games a week. There's nothing wrong with that. But I believe if you have an edge, you're leaving money on the table. So if you only have an edge in 2 games for the week, only bet those 2. If you have an edge in 30, bet those 30. Don't leave money on the table, but at the same time, be careful when selecting your edges. Like I said, if you have an edge, not if you think you have an edge or if you might have an edge, if you have an edge. Bankroll management is knowing it's a marathon and not a sprint. Like I said, drop the fantasy of becoming rich. Even if you were to become rich on sports betting, you're not going to do it in one day. You're not going to do it in 1 week. Stop chasing. If you have a bad night, you have a bad night. Don't double down or triple down or try to gain back all your losses by betting the Hawaii game on a college football Saturday. For example, look at my college football results last year. I hit 57.2% against the spread for the year, but I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losing weeks. I averaged about 2.57 units of profit per week. At $100, that's about $257 a week in profit. That's side money at best. I'm not going to become rich off that. My last week last year was bowl week. I lost 1.81 units on sides and I lost 11 units on money lines. It was not good for me in bowl week. I could have had an even better season if not for bowl week. But I didn't try to gain back all those losses betting college basketball afterwards. I just accepted and move on. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Your gains are going to be incremental and small. Stop thinking about 1 day or 1 week and think about the whole season or the whole year. And then it starts to make sense. I won 41 units on college football last year. Those didn't all come in 1 day. Those didn't all come in 1 week. Here's one of my baseball models. I call it the ATM. It's an experimental model at the moment, but here's the last 15 days of how it's done. Over the last 15 days, it is up 0.67 units. That's hardly anything. That's barely breaking even. But look at the day-by-day results. It seems to be feast or famine. I either win a lot or I lose a lot. There's not a lot of days that are just kind of losing a little or losing less. But over time, I am up 0.67 units or an ROI of 0.4%. For every bad day you have, if you're doing things right, you're going to have a good day. The good days and bad days are going to balance each other out over time. You need to look at everything in terms of the long run here. If I were to bet every single game that my ATM model shows an edge on, I were to bet 173 times. That's what that is right there. But I don't. I have a system called the roller right here. What the roller does is it sorts all my edges in the model from highest to lowest and tries to find a peak. Here's your peak right here in yellow. That's my peak. So basically, anything with an edge of 13% or higher has a cumulative profit of 11 units or an ROI of 52.4%. But everything below that, it starts to drop off. See? It even goes into the negative the lower the edge gets. So if I were to bet anything with an edge lower than 13%, I would have a negative ROI or a minus expected value play. The roller calculates what games I truly have an edge in. Think of it as a calibration. So according to the roller, I should only bet when the edge is 13% or higher because that's where the profit is. Everything below that is unprofitable. That's how you find your true edge. I call that the true edge. Yes, if I were to bet every single game in the ATM, I would have an ROI of 0.4%. That 0.4% is being propped up by this 13% and higher number right here. So in the ATM, this number right here, the 1101, represents the cumulative units won at 13% or higher. This number right here, the minus 1034, represents the cumulative units lost at 13% or lower. So if I were to bet anything with an edge of 13% or lower, it's a massive negative ROI. I only need to be betting at 13% or higher. That's my true edge. Ideally, your model is going to have a true edge at the very bottom because everything that shows an edge is profitable, right? But that's just not how it works. Some models have lower true edges than others. This one's kind of high at 13%, but I have others that are right at the bottom where the ideally is, where the true edge is 0.01, for example. That's what you want. That's what you want to strive for. But using this roller approach right here, I can either bet flat or I can bet based on the ROI numbers in a variable unit fashion. It's really up to me. I do both. Like I said, I do a tiered approach. That's not the only model I bet on. ATM is not all I use. It's just one of the many models I use to bet on baseball. So to wrap things up here, bankroll management is all about discipline. It's all about a disciplined approach where you think about the long run. Like I said, you're not going to become rich in a day or a week. You need to think about the long run, the whole season, the whole year, multiple seasons. Any profit you make doing this is going to be very small steps forward, baby steps forward. You're not going to ever take giant leaps or huge bounces ahead in terms of profit. It's always going to be very small and slow. And a lot of people can't handle that. They want to become rich now. They think sports betting is their ticket to becoming rich now and winning a lot of money. And even if they do take an undisciplined approach and succeed and win a lot of money, they become even more greedy and think, okay, I got this all figured out, I'm going to bet even more, and eventually they're going to give it all back and be in the red. You have to be extremely disciplined betting on sports. That's where bankroll management comes into play. If you can't exercise restraint, if you can't exercise discipline, you are going to lose no matter how good your model is, how good you are at picking winners. You are going to lose in the long run. I mean, I'm going back to my college football model here. 57.2%. A lot of people would kill to have that for a season. That's what I had last year. And that was just against the spread. But 57.2 against the spread with the high volume approach I went with only won me 27 units on the year. That's $2,700 for the $100 better. I'm sorry, that's not going to get you rich. That's good side income. I mean, you can use that to go on vacation or something, but drop the fantasy. You're not going to become rich doing this. And the sooner you accept that, the easier it is to take a disciplined approach. I would kill to hit 57% again this upcoming season, but I'm not going to have the bankroll to make any meaningful money off of that. Even if I had a $100,000 bankroll and was betting $1,000 a game, hitting that 57%, that's still only $26,000 for the season. I mean, that's still a lot of money, but it's not what I call FU money. I'm still not going to go be able to buy a yacht with it or a house or a car. I mean, I could buy a car with $27,000, but you get the idea here. Sports betting profit for 99.9% of people is just side money. That's all it is. So if you're like a lot of people and just bet on sports for the entertainment value so you can have a rooting interest in a game you normally wouldn't have a rooting interest in, then you should probably take a more low risk, low reward approach. High risk, high reward approaches are more for people who not so much are trying to make money doing this, but have a good model, a good system, and think that they have profitable approaches. That's where we'd use a more higher risk approach. But if you're those people who just want a rooting interest on games and just bet on games, I don't even know why you're watching my channel, first of all, because this is more about profitable approaches. But you need to take a more low-risk approach so your money can last longer. So to wrap things up, it's about discipline, it's about dropping the fantasy, it's about having a bankroll you can afford to lose and betting only a small fraction of that bankroll per game so you can make it last. It's about betting when you have an edge, and it's about being smart when it comes to flat versus variable unit betting, and it's about learning that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and having realistic expectations of what you can expect even if you're successful. So that does it for today. Until next time, this is Sports Betting Truth, signing off.